this working as well? Okay. Welcome. I'm okay, I promise, but I'm here in Libby's stead. She is home ill, and if you're watching, be sure to take your meds, love. I'll up to some prayer, then give a quick intro. My name's John Baum, by the way. My wife is Libby Baum. She's the education committee person. I have no responsibility whatsoever. We'll start with some prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to come together like this on a rainy morning to learn and grow and simply be together. In your name we pray. Amen. So today we are overjoyed to have Whitney Woodward here to introduce the Little Books, Big Lessons, Faith and Picture books. Over the past 20 plus years, Whitney Woodward has worked as a teacher, an instructional coach, curriculum specialist, program administrator, and executive director in public and independent schools. Currently, she serves as the director of teaching and learning for pre-first through second grade at the Westminster Schools. She's also a parent of 3 children, loves to read, and she had something parenthetical here. This is plenty of information. She loves to read. We'll stop there. Thank you. Whitney Woodward.
Thank you for coming. It is rainy and a holiday weekend, and we're all here together, and I'm really excited about it. So we are here to talk about picture books, and I love that when some folks walked in, you just came up to take a look. That's exactly the way picture books should make you feel. There's something magical about a picture book. I love them. I always have. And they teach us things, and they allow us to wonder, and they put grand ideas into succinct tales. And children can learn so much through them. So I would love to start today, if it's all right, sharing one of my favorite picture books that I had never heard of until I first started teaching, which, as John mentioned, was quite a while ago. And it's a tale called The Empty Pot. And if you've read it, this is what I tell children. If you've read it, then it's a reread. And rereads are also super powerful because you always get something out of it that you hadn't gotten before. So if you will indulge me, come along with me learning how to use the clicker, and we'll go old school. Well, this is going to be a very succinct, speaking of. All right, I'm so sorry. It just wants to stay on this slide. That's not it. See if I can do the. This really doesn't want me to change it.
That's okay. That's because of this. Unplug this part right here, and now try.
Well, it's a great book. You'll just have to take my word for it. No worries. Well, I'll start off just by telling it to you, and then we'll pick up where it comes out. So The Empty Pot. Imagine many years ago in China, there was a small child named Ping, and Ping loved flowers, and Ping was an incredible gardener. And everything that Ping put into soil grew into incredible flowers and beautiful gardens. But it wasn't just Ping. Everyone in the kingdom loved flowers, but no one loved them more than the emperor. The emperor, who was emperor of a huge land, loved gardening and tended to his own garden. But the emperor was getting older and realized that someday he would need someone to take the throne, and he needed someone who would be his successor. So he worked with his advisors, and he decided whoever can grow the most beautiful flower in a year's time will be the next emperor. So all the children were very excited about this possibility, and their parents were very excited too. But no one was more excited than Ping, because Ping had this incredible green thumb and knew that he could grow an incredible flower. So all the children went to the palace, and they all collected a seed, and they went home with it. And again, no one's more excited than Ping. Ping is all over this. So Ping got the richest black soil, planted the seed, put it in a pot, and waited. And nothing happened. So then Ping waited a little bit longer, repotted, put in more rich black soil, and nothing happened. 2 months passed, nothing happened. Meanwhile, he was starting to see all of his friends' seeds begin to sprout, and he was feeling all the feels that you would feel if yours was the one that wasn't growing. And his friend came along. In the book, they call it his clever friend, but when I read this with my children, we're like, maybe clever is not the right word, saying, "Oh, Ping, your seed is not growing and mine is doing very well." And Ping felt very ashamed because he could not get his seed to grow.
Hold for
I know
effect.
you're all in suspense. What's going to happen with Ping?
All right. One
This
second.
is my family in North Carolina.
So sorry, my friends.
It's all good.
It's Google Slides, correct?
Uh-huh. Yeah, if you just go to the,
That
there
one.
it is. Yep.
All right.
We're going to get to this in just a minute. It's going to be great,
Sometimes technology does not like us. And
which
that
is why we're talking about going to,
There you go.
oh, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, thanks. All right, see, it is a real book. So here's Ping loving flowers. Everyone in the kingdom loves them. Emperor is very old, needed a successor. And I love the colors of this book too, and the way too that because they're in these circles, it does give you a sense of a different time, like you're peering into a different moment. Here are the children lining up to get their seeds. And here is Sweet Ping on the right side. All right, so we'll start here. He watered it every day. He couldn't wait to see it sprout, grow, and bloom into a beautiful flower. Day after day passed, but nothing grew in his pot. Ping was very worried. He put new soil into a bigger pot, and then he transferred the seed into rich black soil. Another 2 months he waited, still nothing happened. By and by, a whole year passed. And I love that illustration with his sweet little hat and scarf on. Spring came, and all the children put on their best clothes to greet the emperor. They rushed to the palace with their beautiful flowers, eagerly hoping to be chosen. Ping was ashamed of his empty pot. He thought the other children would laugh at him because for once he couldn't get a flower to grow. His clever friend, again, clever, holding a great big plant. "Ping," he said, "you're not really going to the emperor with an empty pot, are you? Couldn't you grow a great big flower like mine?" "I've grown lots of flowers better than yours," Ping said. "It's just this seed that won't grow." Ping's father overheard and said, "You did your best, and your best is good enough to present to the emperor." Holding the empty pot in his hands, Ping went straight away to the palace. The emperor was looking at the flowers slowly, one by one. How beautiful all the flowers were. But the emperor was frowning and did not say a word. Finally, he came to Ping. Ping hung his head in shame, expecting to be punished. The emperor asked him, "Why did you bring an empty pot?" Ping started to cry and replied, "I planted the seed you gave me, and I watered it every day, but it didn't sprout. I put it in a better pot with better soil, but still it didn't sprout. I tended it all year long, but nothing grew. So today I had to bring an empty pot without a flower. It was the best I could do." When the emperor heard these words, a smile slowly spread over his face, and he put his arm around Ping. Then he exclaimed to one and all, "I have found him. I found the one person worthy of being emperor. Where you got your seeds from, I do not know, for the seeds I gave you all had been cooked. So it was impossible for any of them to grow. I admire Ping's great courage to appear before me with the empty truth, and now I reward him with my entire kingdom and make him emperor of all the land." I mean, what a great tale. But there are so many morals that you can take out of this, and since we do have a group, if you would like to share what your takeaway was, and spoiler alert, there are no wrong answers, with whoever's sitting next to you, just take a minute, or if you are not in the mood to talk with a stranger, just think about it for a sec, and then I'd love if we could just share what different pieces we got out of this. All right, who's got an idea for one of the lessons you could take out of this? There's a small group, so just shout out. Go for it.
It takes courage to tell the truth, particularly when it's going to be humbling.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so then we sort of thought that the other children planted other seeds that got somewhere else, which wasn't honest. And Ping had faith in the emperor and was following instructions faithfully every day. And the whole thing wasn't about the flowers, it was about the faith in the emperor. And the emperor rewarded that with the kingdom.
I mean, so many connections we could make to lessons learned here in this building, right? All right. Well, thank you for sharing this one with me. So children, just like you and me, learn so much more from books than what's explicitly written on the page. They infer and they connect. And in the classrooms, we talk a lot about how children make text-to-self connections, like Ping did this and I do this, so they can see themselves as the character. We talk about text-to-text connections, say that 10 times fast, where you talk about what happens in a book and, oh, it reminds me of this other book that I read. Text-to-world connections, you can take that where it goes, obviously. But then we don't often talk about text-to-faith connections, and that's what I'm really excited for us to talk more about this morning. So come along with me. We're going to take a little journey across history as we talk about how children learn stories in the Bible and how children learn to read. So we're going to kind of go in a couple different places, but I promise we'll come back on a landing. So in history, children learned a lot from how stories were passed along to them and from images. I was also an art history major, so thank you for indulging me with this for a second. So when we think about Gutenberg Bible, 1450s-ish. Before that, we had most of the population was illiterate. So they learned through oral stories and we learned through images. In 1669, and yes, I had to look this up, in Amsterdam, we still had about half the population, give or take, who were illiterate. More men could read than women, but it was still about half of it. If you were a child coming to look at this picture without any backstory, you would see it literally as it is. You see one man hugging another man, another kind of looking on. Sure, just exactly objectively. And then when you add the story of the return of the prodigal son, it adds different elements to it that children are able to take out. So kind of taking bits and pieces from this, when the prodigal son, and I'm just skimming over the verses, but we're in Luke 15, 17 through 32, give or take. So when the prodigal son was a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And the father said, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to him, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. The son of mine was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost, and now he's found. But the older son was on the field, and when he came to the house, he heard music and dancing, and asked what was going on. He was told that his brother had come back, father has killed a fattened calf, and the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So the father went out and pleaded with him, and he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you killed the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours, but we have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. If a child hears that story, children are very literal. This might be a tough one for them to understand just the story, but when we add the image to it, it makes more sense because we see the prodigal son is humanized. And I put this here, oh, I gotta take my mic, I'm sorry. When you take it, and see where it's hung, think about where a child's line of vision is going to be, right about on the feet. If there's something a child can relate to, it's having dirty feet. So they're able to see this as a real human. Another thing children are so well versed on is being an envious sibling. They know this story better than anyone. So they understand what this brother is feeling right now. How come they got this and I didn't? So this image allows this story to have more meaning to it. All that to say, images allow us to have a different power for children as they're still building up their knowledge about the world. So we move on from the 1600s and how information gets passed. All right, you ready? I'm going to see how much of my grad school I can remember. For those of you who are also in elementary ed, welcome to the timeline. When we talk about how literacy has been taught, it really wasn't meant for the mass population until we started getting to 1700s, early 1800s. And then it was about recitation. Could you recite it? It was mostly religious. Instruction focused on pronunciation, on oral reading and memorization. You had your primers. In colonial America, the ability to read was the primary goal, but not a lot of focus on comprehension. We get into a transition period a little bit later, rise of public education, thank you Horace Mann, introduced more guided readers and encouraged moving beyond simple phonics towards understanding, but there still wasn't that focus on deep analysis of reading. And then in the 60s and 70s, we get into that cognitive shift where the rise of cognitive science changed how researchers viewed reading. The focus was on not just repetition, but how the mind processes, stores, and retrieves information. So we see how it's kind of moving along through time as we've learned more about reading. And then the reading wars start in the 1990s, which emphasized the need for evidence-based instruction, phonics, and subsequently the digital age, where the goal shifted to extracting, synthesizing, and analyzing information from various media. And that's kind of where we still are hanging out right now. So big drivers of change: industrialization, this cognitive science, and of course the digital age. So lots of different pieces. Where we are and where we are teaching literacy right now, and as someone who works with teaching children how to read, this is kind of the best visual we have when we teach children how to read. This is something called Scarborough's reading rope. Librarians, I know you've seen this one, so thank you for coming back with me here. So we really see learning to read in two specific parts. We have language comprehension, which is the understanding part, and then our lower part, which is the word recognition. So when the cooler colors at the bottom here, that becomes increasingly automatic. We want automaticity in reading. It allows for that. That's really our fluency piece, right? We'll take a closer dive to it. And I'm sorry, I picked from two different sources, so the cool colors became warm colors, but we're still on the bottom part of the reading rope. So you've got phonological awareness. Those sounds like at for cat, or if you tap it out, my OG friends, Oregon Gillingham friends. Each of those sounds is a phoneme, and we put them together to build this phonological awareness, literally what you hear. A great conversation for another day is about oral language and how reading and how those fit together to build true readers. But when we get to phonological awareness, this is how we have spoken language like rhymes and syllables. If you're not reading nursery rhymes to a child, do it, because that's the best way to really build that phonological awareness. But we also talk about decoding, using that language of phonics to literally sound out unfamiliar words. And then we talk about sight recognition, words that don't fall into our phonics rules. English is really hard to learn because we take from Anglo-Saxon, Latin, Greek roots. So we have a good amount of sight words that do just have to be memorized. But once we have all of these pieces, they can read fluently. I've been working with kindergartners for a very long time. And I know no one in this room would ever do it, but I've had many parents come and say, my child's a gifted reader. They can read Harry Potter. Great, I'm so glad. So the child can come in, and some of them can fluently read pages from Harry Potter. But then here's the trick. We say, tell us about what you read. So they're a fluent reader, but they can't read Harry Potter. If you can read it out loud, but you don't understand what you're reading, you're not reading it. You're saying it. So when we go back to the rope, we go to our automaticity in reading, which we do have to have, but you have to have the language comprehension piece. And from my experience, teaching language comprehension is by far the more challenging of the two. You can fully master fluent reading, but language comprehension is something that no one ever masters. We had a literacy audit at my school not too long ago, which every school, every business should audit what they do to see what they're doing well and what they still need to improve on. So we did that with literacy. It was like emptying out our closets, what works, what doesn't work, what do we need to Marie Kondo. And we found a lot of information about what we're doing well and what needs to change. Because with every year, every moment, we're finding more and more research about how to better teach children to read. And especially in a time when I was here for a couple talks not too long ago, and John, I know in high school you feel this with your soul, children aren't finishing books. And so if we can get these pieces in place, we're at least setting them up for success as best we can. So all that to say, sorry, I've been off my notes, so let me get back here. One of our trainers that we had during our literacy audit talked about making sure assuaging our fears. What if we do this curriculum and our children lose that love of reading? She said, yes, we want love of reading, but we also want them to have love of content. And that was a real mind shift for me. When we teach writing at our school, we teach them to become storytellers, to share how-to knowledge, to share all these pieces out, and that writing is the medium to get there. If they're really excited about sharing information, which all children are, they love to share new things, learning to write, that's the incentive. With reading, it's this similar thing. If they're excited about a story and they love reading with you, then learning how to read themselves gets them to content that they're excited about. So, just my little soapbox. I learned it recently and I wanted to share it out. All right, so when we get to this top part of the rope, language comprehension, we're going to start at the bottom, if you don't mind. So literacy and knowledge, this is really knowing how print works. And this is, I give tours at my school also, and I always tell parents, you are your child's first teacher, because children learn to read on the laps of their parents. You teach them literacy knowledge. This is how letters work, punctuation, but at the very beginning, when a child's on your lap and you're flipping the pages for them, or if you're putting your fingers so they see that left to right, you're showing them basic literacy knowledge. When you go to a bookshelf, and again, I'm looking at my librarians, I feel really intimidated you're here, because if I misspeak, I hope y'all will keep me in line. When you look at a bookshelf, you see the spines, and that's how we know that there's information on the spine. When you go to the cover page and you read the title and go to the title, these are pieces of literacy knowledge that you have probably done automatically that you don't even realize you're doing with your children. So literacy knowledge starts with parents, and it builds off further with educators. So when we have verbal reasoning and language structure, I'd really love to talk actually about language structure and vocabulary, because we see how these are learned through explicit instruction as well as exposure to a variety of texts. So these are ones that do come with being in a classroom, being taught these pieces. But the two that I really want to focus on are background knowledge and verbal reasoning, because children are super literal, like really literal. And wouldn't you be, though, if you were relatively new to the world? Amelia Bedelia, that's why children get such a kick out of Amelia Bedelia books, because she's so literal, and they're like, oh, she's hilarious. It's like she's hilarious because she's also kind of just like you are, and that's okay. But children have these limited background knowledge, but really developmentally, they only see the world as it relates to them, and that is exactly where they're supposed to be. Children are self-centered because developmentally, that's where they are. They can't understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes until they really figure out what it's like to be in their own shoes. So they build empathy and awareness and sympathy over time. These are not things children are inherently born with, because they're still figuring out what it feels like to them before they can figure out what it feels like to somebody else. So if you want your children to learn about faith, though, the Bible is a really hard place to start. So I asked one of my children, I was like, just pick a random passage. He was like, I got you, Mom. Oh, I did not bring my glasses. All right, so he picked it out of Esther. He's like, literally did this. So when Mordecai learned that all had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went through the city wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloths, in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree came, etc., etc. If you are little hearing this, there's so much background knowledge that you would need to understand that. It's not feasible, and that's okay. We don't expect children to start with the Bible. There are definitely some passages that are universal, absolutely, but if you're looking at true understanding, you need to start elsewhere. So the language is challenging. Everything happened a really long time ago also. Time doesn't really make sense to children the way that it makes sense to you and me. If you ask a 3-year-old, what'd you do last week? They might tell you what they did at Christmas. They might tell you what they did last year, if they remember. They might tell you what they did an hour ago. Time is really different to little people, which is very entertaining if you work with little people. But when you're trying to explain this happened thousands of years ago, that's not going to make sense to them. And again, that's okay. They're just not there yet. But if we look at bigger themes found in the Bible, we do find them in children's books. We use these books to build background knowledge and verbal reasoning in a more developmentally appropriate way for children. Again, for them to get this language comprehension piece, they have to understand the background knowledge. I remember being in like 4th grade, I think, reading a book, Snow Treasure. Anybody remember that one? It's great. It's a chapter book, which felt like a big deal too, about these children who would hide gold bullion and sled to get the gold safely away from Nazis who are invading their town. It's great, but if you don't understand World War II, that's really not going to make a lot of sense to you. You have to have that background knowledge for the story to make sense. So when we talk about background knowledge, we're talking in broader strokes for young children. So we want to give them developmentally appropriate ways for children to be able to understand and also to question faith. We want to go back to that idea of really looking at information flexibly. They will get the idea, the ability to look from different perspectives, but it takes time. This is one of those pieces, again, language comprehension is not something that gets mastered, ever. I think you can have read your entire life, but language comprehension, like many things, is a muscle that you work to keep strong, but you don't master it. You always work towards it. All right, so I am not my school librarian. I'm also not my school chaplain, but I talked with both of them about finding ways for us to think in broad parts about themes in picture books to really build that text-to-faith connection in a meaningful way by selecting books with a little more nuance. You can find books that are very explicit in how they talk through each piece, and those are great too. But if we want to build flexible thinkers for our children, we want to be able to have them question what they read. Also, I've been thinking a lot about the sermon series we've been having, and when I was kind of putting this together, how it really does all fit hand in glove, how even as adults with the empty pot, we can take pieces out of succinct stories if we just put the time into it and give it that mental space. So with that, some themes to look at. Oh, come on now. We were doing so well. There we go. Some 6 themes that, yes, these can overlap in different books, but if we look at the golden rule, if we look at forgiveness, unconditional love, that's a really hard one, compassion and empathy, which is also hard, being an upstander, and then, of course, faith. We can see what these look like. So I've grabbed some examples. Some are here, and some are going to be on these on the next couple slides, the covers. These are all great books. I recommend them wholeheartedly. But then the question comes, when you're reading this book, how do you read them with your children? So I wanted to share something with you this is called dialogic conversation, which is just basically a fancy way of how to talk with children about books. When we did our literacy audit, they talked with us a lot about building vocabulary for children. And the big way to do this is through dialogic conversation. And you all have done this at some point with a baby in your life, where they hand you something and you say, oh, you're handing me the ball? You add that vocabulary that they don't quite have yet. Or if you can see the example here, you engage them with a question, they answer, you give an answer that layers onto it, and then they can respond again. So this is a piece that works really for any age. Sometimes I feel like I catch myself doing this with my 17-year-old because it's just part of what we do. And it's also part of what you do when you talk to an adult. Sometimes you're hearing what they say and then layering onto it with your response, but it's all part of this idea of dialogic conversation. And again, if you have little people, you're doing this constantly. They hand you something like, I want that thing. I remember, I'm sure you all have examples like this too. my middle son was like, asked for a sandwich. I was like, great, what do you want on your sandwich? He was like, I want turkey, but can I have the white cheese? And I was like, the white cheese? What's the white cheese? I was like, brie? It's like, I don't remember him having so we talked through it and finally realized, oh, mayonnaise. You want mayonnaise on your sandwich. He didn't have the word for it, but all that to say, these are things we do all the time with dialogic conversation, and we can just elevate it as we talk through books and themes. So, dialogic conversation, we feel good? All right. So, when we talk about the golden rule, we have some that are a little more overt, literally the golden rule here, which this is a really beautiful book where it talks about, this is one of the ones where, again, we talked about being a little bit more literal. It's a conversation with a child and an adult talking about the golden rule, and they talk about what the golden rule is in other cultures. So they talk through what Christianity says, what Judaism says, what Islam says, what Hinduism says, to really see that the golden rule is universal. It's not just something that's learned in one place, but it's a universal rule. Bless you. When we talk about the 3 questions, this is taken from Tolstoy, a book where it's this boy asking these 3 big questions. So many good books, such little time. He asks these questions, when is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? And what is the right thing to do? In addition to having the most beautiful illustrations, it talks this idea through from this Tolstoy story in ways that are bite-sized and a little bit more palatable for children to have. It makes it understandable. Again, they don't have the background knowledge to know, bless you, who Tolstoy is. And they shouldn't, they're little. But if you break it down for them, then they can start asking themselves these questions, like, why is the golden rule important? And then Do Unto Otters is super cute. It's a book about manners and otters. I mean, perfect pairing. All right. Talking about forgiveness. If you are not familiar with Know David, you have been missing out. It is great. And reading this book with children is the funnest thing ever, especially because on one of these pages, David is not wearing pants and they see his bare bottom, and children think it's the funniest thing ever. The other thing children really love is they love it when other kids get in trouble. Like, it's their favorite thing. They love seeing, and this is not just in books, they like to tell you when someone did something wrong. Again, I've worked in elementary school for a really long time, and it is just where they are, and that is okay. It's not schadenfreude necessarily, it really is just, they think it's very intriguing when someone does something wrong. So Know David, and the best part is the author, David, wrote this because when he was a child, he wrote a book that was basically no and all the things he was doing wrong, so I kind of love that. But, I mean, David is doing all the things. Sometimes he does them not meaning to be naughty, sometimes he's just having fun and oblivious, and sometimes he's got that little mischievous twinkle in his eye. But at the end, I mean, David, get it together. He's got his mouth full. Then he gets sent to his room. He had crossed the line. And then he's still bad in his room. So once he gets to the very end, he broke a vase. And you can't fix a big vase like that unless you've got some really good glue. And I have a feeling gluing is not David's forte. He does all these naughty things, but then his mom says, Davy, come here. And at the last page, yes, David, I love you. I mean, we could take this 16 different ways, about the sinful nature of humans and how we are always forgiven. I mean, I know it seems like such a trite story, but this is how children build background knowledge on what forgiveness is. He was so naughty. He was so bad. And there's not just a one Know David book. David is naughty through a whole series of books. He is super naughty, but he always gets forgiven because forgiveness is always there for us. There's another one, too, about, because children are always like, how come it's okay? They were so bad. Sometimes children want punishment because they don't understand that sorry can be enough sometimes. Also, if you ever see a very small child, tell them you're sorry. Sorry. It's like, you have to mean it. Sorry. Children really struggle with this idea of forgiveness because they're not very good. But this one little word, these sweet girls are friends and they get in trouble. and the argument becomes a monster, and it gets very big because they're super mad at each other. And then one of them finally says, sorry. And the other one says sorry back very quietly because, kids. And the monster, the argument is the monster, shrinks and shrinks because forgiveness was able to quell the argument. So if they need a more visual idea of what forgiveness looks like, it's a great way for the sweet literal children to really understand what that can look like. All right, how am I doing on time? Great. Okay, unconditional love. They really know this from you all. They know this from parents. They know this from adults. They know this from Know David's mom, that someone is always there to love them. But they don't really understand kind of what that looks like outside of their bubble. So just some examples. If you love sobbing while reading out loud, I recommend the book Love. It is so beautiful, talking about what love is. It talks about how love is, in times you learn to recognize a love overlooked, a love that wakes at dawn, rides to the bus at work, a slice of burnt toast tastes like love, all that different way that love is around us all the time. You see these two boys, the dad's going out early in the morning and the brother is making burnt toast. That's love, that's unconditional love. As all these examples, I can't talk about it because it is such a beautiful book. I will get teary-eyed. Recommend you read it and get teary-eyed too. Love You Forever is a classic. The book Red, it's a crayon who's a blue crayon in a red wrapper, and it feels very out of place, but the family loves him unconditionally. He finds people that love him for exactly as he is, even though he's different from the other crayons. Then we talk about compassion and empathy. These are also really hard ones for children because they're still figuring themselves out. And they're just starting to learn what that looks like when they do have compassion and empathy. Maddie's Fridge is a great book where we have two little friends, and Maddie is the friend. And when the friend visits Maddie's house, she opens the fridge and realizes there's nothing in it. And she doesn't know what to do because she realized Maddie doesn't have food to eat. So how can she be a friend while also not embarrassing her friend? How can she help make sure her friend has enough to eat while not making her uncomfortable? So it's really beautifully done in bite-sized words and pieces, so that way they can really understand each other. Yo, Yes is a great one too when children are first starting to read. Pretty much the only words on this book are yo and yes. But it's a great way too of teaching punctuation. These two boys are talking, and one's like, yo, and he's like, yes, and they're figuring out the buddies, and then he gets quiet, and he goes, yo, question mark, and he's like, no friends. So he figures out that for them to be happy, he's like, I'll be your friend. So very simple, few words, but the message is really profound on how we build compassion and empathy. And then Kate DiCamillo, if you've read any of her books, she is just the most incredible author. And this is one of her picture books. She writes a bunch of wonderful chapter books for young adults. But this is a picture book where a little girl sees a man who has one of the music boxes, and the monkey's collecting coins outside in the snow, and she worries about him. She's in her pageant at her church, and she invites him to come see her pageant, and it brings her great joy, which is her line as the angel too. It also makes me teary-eyed. It's a beautiful book. And I think too, being an upstander, we kind of talk about all of these pieces of being the Good Samaritan, and that's hard for children because how can, as a child, how can you be a Good Samaritan? But they see it in these books. They see the littlest girl, or the smallest girl in the smallest grade. She's teeny. Look at her, she's tiny. But she sees bad things going on in her school, and people are pushing, and people are not using nice words, and she raises her hand and is like, hey, this is not right. I think we should all be nice to each other, and one voice changes things. People start being nicer to each other because they raise their hand too. It's like, yes, we should all be nice to each other. But again, they have to see it. Children need to see it in ways that make sense. And one book is not going to do it. This is building that background knowledge, which again, we talk about language comprehension. This is a lifetime skill. You're just helping children strengthen that muscle. So that way, when they do get to the story of the Good Samaritan, it's like, oh, that's being a good upstander. It's like, yeah, totally is. See, that's a text-to-text connection. See, it all weaves together. And then last but not least, we do talk about faith. And faith is really hard for children. Questioning something knowing something will happen when you don't know why. We've got our literal little minds, and knowing something's going to happen when I can't see it and I can't feel it. So we have some that are You Are Special by Max Lucado. This one is a little more written explicitly. It's written, if y'all haven't read any of his books, they're wonderful with looking at themes in Christianity. But it really does talk through this puppet maker. I might be able to guess who the puppet maker, or the doll maker. And they put stickers on each other to show that they care for each other. And one of them has all these blue dots. And so he goes and asks how come he has blue dots. But then when he goes and sees the doll maker, there's another doll who has no dots. And he's like, why aren't you wearing any stars or dots? She's like, well, I don't need them because I know I'm loved. And then he realized he didn't need the stickers after all. I'm butchering the story. It's really good. You should read it yourself. But it's a great one when talking about faith. And then All We Need Is Love and a Really Soft Pillow. Children think it's hilarious. But it really does teach them you don't need all these things. You just need love. You need to be with who you are, well, and a really soft pillow, of course. But it starts these conversations about faith that if you talk with your children, you can help guide what those conversations look like as they're figuring it out. Figuring out the world's really hard for children, and it takes a long time. That's why childhood is so long. So we have to guide those conversations, whether that's through dialogic conversation, letting them have think time to think about it. But there is scientific research showing us that having these conversations really do build who they are as a reader, but then also as people, just building good people. All right, we've talked through a lot this morning, but I hope you're really encouraged that there are pieces like Science of Reading to encourage you to read with children, whether or not they're your children. Children benefit being read to. If you read out loud with them also, just so you know, you don't have to read right at the level they're on. Children can really understand books that are 2 years above where they are able to read fluently. So you can read them books that they can't read themselves, and they still get a lot out of them. Hopefully everybody has inferred that at this point. But also, just as an educator, my advice to parents is not only to read with their children, but to let children see you read also, because they will do what we say, but they do what we do, and they listen to what we say. But again, if they see us reading, then they see themselves as reader too, because they see what the future can look like. And if they ask us questions about what we're reading, then they're going to ask questions about what they're reading too. And if they hear us making connections from literature to faith, then they're going to start doing that too. And if they know to look for God's miracles everywhere, even in books, then they can start to do that too. And it's really such a privilege to help children in this way. But thank you so much for spending the morning together. I want to make sure, a long story short, pun intended, but just if anyone had any connections or any questions, I want to make sure we had a couple minutes before heading off to service. Ugh, there it is.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions at all? All right.
Disappointed with the technology revolution, which seems to be moving away from books and everyone's stuck on their tablets and phones.
It's the worst, yes. And we did, post-COVID, we did a study at our school just to find research reinforcing what everyone feels in their gut about is reading on a Kindle the same as reading a book in paper? And there's this great book called Read or Come Home that I recommend reading. Read the book. And it really does say that if you want children to store things in long-term memory, they need to read it off tangible pages and not just through screens. I think there are places for apps like Sora or Epic. If a child's whipping through a series, like if they're on Percy Jackson and the library doesn't have it and you just want to get through that next piece, that's fine. But if you're really looking for meaningful books that children put in long-term storage, there's no substitute for paper.
Just a comment from a neurologic perspective. Vision is our most powerful sense, and we understand the most about it. And you have a fast visual system and a slow visual system. The fast is in fractions of a millisecond, the slow is several milliseconds. And the fast is to determine whether there's a threat in the environment. You see something coming at you. And the slow one is color, and it tells you that it's Aunt Tilly, not a saber-toothed tiger. So your nervous system is geared to taking in images very quickly. And it's said in the art world that an image is worth 1,000 words, which I believe it to be true. And so the children, it's just great that you're so consciously aware of this with the teaching of various messages to children, that they get these images, boom, like this. You don't have to learn how to read a word or say a word. They get the message, how it's depicted. So it's very, very, very powerful. And I think that the books and the reading of the books, what that has over the tablets, which is just a screen, is that you have an adult, a parent or somebody else, who's reading this, and you're teaching them all these other things simultaneously about the spine, the title, asking questions, and all of that's just very powerful. And then finally, we have two cerebral hemispheres, as you know, and 90% of the world is left hemispheric dominant for language, and we call that the